What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Rubber Match. Excited week hiatus is over. We are back. We'll be back through the rest of the season. Excited to be here as always. I'm your host, Evan Kamiko. This is the Rubber Match. A great weekend of Arkansas athletics here on the Hill for Woo Pig weekend. It starts with spring football on Saturday. That's really the weekend cap, but right here on the Rubber Match, you know what we talk about. We talk about softball and we talk about baseball. Courtney Deifel's squad going to be taking on Colorado State. That series this weekend here on the Hill. And baseball hosting preseason number 1. They've won 7 in a row. It's the Texas A&M Aggies, the 2024 runners-up in the College Baseball World Series. That should be a really big blast, and we will get into all of that and more. Special guests for the week. I tell you guys, you don't want to listen to me every week, because who wants to do that? It's Jon Williams from Jon and Deke on the radio, 94.9, not to mention as well, he's the PA voice at Baum-Walker Stadium. You hear him at football games. You hear him at basketball games. He is everywhere. He'll be joining the show in just a little bit. But let's preview kind of with my quick takeaways before we get into that interview. The big questions for the weekend is Arkansas is coming off a series loss against Georgia. They won last night against UAPB 13-3 in 8 innings. Reese Robinette, a really big night. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. But let's talk about this Georgia series really quickly. My biggest takeaways, there's 2 things. And we've got to start with the pitching rotation, and specifically Gabe Gackle. Now, look, we're going to pull up his K count for this season. It is at 42. Not a great number, not Zach Root's 67, but still 42 for your original ace. It's been an up-and-down season, and now Gabe Gackle finds himself out of the Arkansas rotation. A really big blow for the Hogs. But the good news, Gage Wood going to be coming back. He will be the Game 2 starter for Gackle in DVH's rotation. Obviously, you would have loved to see Gackle be that number 1 guy and really establish himself as that, but we've seen the transition has been a struggle, and really specifically, he's gotten to those late 1-2, 0-2 counts and hasn't been able to put hitters away in those early innings to really get himself settled in. It'll be interesting now to see where DVH goes and uses him in that rotation. Could he be now that 6th, 7th, 8th inning guy? Will he be the closer like he was last year? Only time will tell. Maybe he'll be a long inning reliever, kind of like that Landon Beidelshees role we saw out of the Ohio State transfer early in the season. Only time will tell, but the good news, Gage Wood is back. The Rooster will be pitching in Game 2 against Texas A&M. Zach Root will be Game 1. Landon Beidelshees Game 3. So not too many changes in the rotation, but obviously very big when you're D1 baseball preseason All-American. Gabe Gackle is no longer in the Arkansas rotation. That's issue number 1. We'll dive into a lot more of that with Jon and what he thinks about that. But issue number 2 right now for the Hogs, and we'll take a look at our field view, because this is where Arkansas has problems. Nolan Souza, as reported a couple days ago, is likely to be out for an extended period, maybe not back at all this season. So where does that leave the Arkansas infield and outfield? The outfield probably going to remain untouched, Davalon Thomas Jr., Maxwell, but really it's the right side of the infield that's going to be a lot of question marks, and that's where I'm curious about. What is DVH going to do? As of right now, what he did in Game 2 last weekend, Gabe Frazier at second base, Cam Kojal at first base, but with Reese Robinette playing how he did last night, there's a potential chance Kojal could go over to second if Frazier keeps struggling, and DVH can try to put Robinette in there to give Arkansas a spark, maybe Rocco Pepe another chance, Michael Anderson, even Kendall Diggs. We saw Kendall start on that rubber match game on Sunday, but unfortunately the Hogs lost in that game in 12 innings. What a game that was. Again, we're going to break that whole thing down coming up with Jon in just a little bit, but that's a lot of question marks that could be on this Arkansas infield. We don't know what it's going to shape up. The good news is there is depth. I don't think anybody in Arkansas should be worrying. Look, let's be real. The sky, ladies and gentlemen, is not falling. I repeat, the sky is not falling for Arkansas baseball. They're still 33-5, still in that top 2 teams in the SEC. Texas number 1, Arkansas number 2. But it's an A&M team that's going to come in really hot this weekend and look to make some noise as they continue to make a mid-season to late-season push for the NCAA tournament, and I think there's a real chance that Arkansas could end up seeing Texas A&M. Some of the projections have the Aggies in maybe that 16 region that would face the 1, or 15 that would face the 2. So there's a lot of question marks. It's a hot Texas A&M team. They're coming off a weekend sweep over South Carolina. So without further ado, let's get you out to our interview with Jon Williams. Enjoy. All right, guys, welcome back into the Rubber Match. Excited to be joined by a guy who maybe has more, titles than I can maybe count on my hands. You've seen him if you're a Razorback fan. It's Jon Williams. Jon, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
I'm excited that you're here. Let's talk baseball. Let's talk about this Georgia series before we move on. Again, a lot of news broke today. Again, Nolan Souza questions. We'll answer those, as well as Gabe Gackle versus Gage Wood. Obviously, that news just broke earlier this morning. But let's talk about this Georgia series. I want your recap. Do you think the sky is falling that they've lost their first series in 2025?
No, I think if I read correctly that the Razorbacks RPI after the Georgia series plummeted from number 1 to number 1. I don't think anything's wrong with losing a series to a team that was number 3 just a couple of weeks ago. And you outscored them by 8 runs because the 2 games you lost were both 1-run games. No, there's no shame in losing SEC series. As rarely do teams go through an SEC schedule without losing a series, especially if it's on the road. Road win series in the SEC are rare, so no shame in losing to a very good Georgia team led by Wes Johnson, who I have to say, one of the very best pitch callers in all of America. I just thought his game plan for the Razorbacks, as far as the way they flipped it, normally it's fastball 1, breaking ball 2. It was the other way around. The Razorback hitters will annihilate fastballs, and Wes Johnson knew that. And so it was mostly breaking balls, a diet of them, and he did a good job containing that offense.
Yeah, and when you really look at it, some of the big swings and misses that we've seen from that middle of the Arkansas order, whether it's Kahio Aloy, Vahiva Aloy, Brent Iredale at times, Cam Gojal, it's been that secondary pitch that's really gotten him, the one where maybe they throw fastball 96, 97 high and then get him with that breaking ball on the outside corner that, you just kind of go golfing for. And it's where we've seen Arkansas struggle a lot this season, especially with those secondary pitches. But as we kind of look forward and move on from that Georgia series, what do you think is kind of the biggest revelation to come out of the weekend that Hog fans can say, all right, like, it's okay, we're going to be fine?
I think, to me, the biggest surprise this year is Aiden Jimenez. I think we all knew that the Aloy brothers were going to rake. I think we knew that Zach Root was going to do really well. Beidelshees has been as advertised. But to me, Aiden Jimenez has been the most reliable arm on that staff. He's been a midweek starter. He's just coming off Tommy John surgery, just a little over a year from that. And you could tell when Dave Van Horn was talking about him in January and February leading up into the first few games, he was dropping hints. He was like, this guy is reliable, and he has come in from the bullpen and doused fires. They call him the fireman. And so to lead to what you just said about Gage Wood and Gabe Gackle and them announcing that Gabe Gackle would be coming out of the second game starter. Now they're going to have Gage Wood doing it. I honestly thought they might put Aiden Jimenez in that role. But with Gage Wood going in that role, now you can control how that goes. Gage Wood hasn't pitched in a little over a month. He's had a little bit of an injury. So what you can do is start Gage Wood, and if anything goes wrong, if he walks guys or doesn't have the command that you'd want against a very hot Texas A&M team, then you can bring Aiden Jimenez in at any point, and he can go 5-6 innings. And that way you're kind of doing it like the Tampa Bay Rays do with the reverse bullpen. And I think I think Dave Van Horn and Matt Hobbs give themselves a little bit of wiggle room by having it doing that way.
I love that you just brought up Aiden Jimenez. He's been probably my favorite pitcher to watch that's come out of the bullpen. Look, when entering the season, you really thought that would almost be Hunter Dietz's role, a guy that's been kind of like Jimenez, who's been hurt but has been able to come back a little bit, and then you never really knew where he was health-wise. So I love that Aiden Jimenez has been emerged as this guy where you kind of saw the potential is there. If you go back and watch some of his 2023 highlights at Oregon State, he looked really good back then. High strikeout numbers. Command wasn't necessarily where it was right now, but a 1.5 ERA in 12 appearances. You'll take that any day of the week out of the bullpen. And again, you almost thought Hunter Dietz would be that this year, but the questions with his arm and still coming off that injury. So to get one of those two guys, and specifically Jimenez, who has the ability to really command the zone and do what he has done, has been really fun to watch.
I have to say, one of the things I love about Aiden Jimenez as a former pitcher is the way, it's like a 90s term. They call it a heavy ball. And he throws the ball where it looks like it's coming off of a mountain. It's always the downward trajectory and the slope that he throws every pitch. It's not just his breaking ball or his slider. His fastball's cut. It goes in on the hands of a righty, and he just throws it to where it never feels like the batter can get under it. They're constantly topping it. He had the one bad pitch Sunday, obviously, that led to the homer that tied the game, that lost the game. But by that point, that was his second appearance. He had already appeared in the weekend. So, he's going to make a bad pitch, and that's okay. But what I love about Aiden Jimenez is just the poise, the mound presence. He never feels flustered. He always seems confident. And the defense plays great behind him, too. And it's like Linus and the blue blanket and Peanuts. He's just something you can rely on that makes you feel better about things. And I think if he's the guy that comes in after Gage, no matter how long Gage Wood goes, I think Arkansas is in a good position with the bullpen right there.
Absolutely. And let's talk about Gabe Gackle while we're on this subject. Where do you see because it always seems like he gets in these, pitcher-friendly counts early in the game, but he just can't get out of it, leaves a fastball high, they take it to the outfield. Next thing you know, there's 3 runs in an inning, 5 runs in an inning, and he really struggles to get out of those first 2 innings. Where do you see for Gabe Gackle maybe his role this weekend, and what has to change for him to get back to where he was back in 2024?
Evan, I think I would actually make the doppelganger to where he's sort of a similar situation to what Brady Tigert was. A couple of years ago, Brady Tigert was the closer. He was all SEC, all freshman, all American. He was unhittable, the incredible knuckle curve, the spin rate. And then obviously Coach Van Horn wants to put him into the bullpen the next year. And it wasn't quite the same translation of dominance that it was coming in the 8th and 9th innings. Same with Gackle. Last year, Gackle virtually unhittable. Coming out of the bullpen last year. So everyone just kind of assumed he's going to take the leap. In fact, he was the Friday starter to start the year, and then they put him at Saturday. He struggled in that role. Not really sure why it is that he isn't able to have the translation from the bullpen to the starters. But until he finds it, Coach Van Horn has such a deep roster of pitchers. You mentioned Hunter Dietz. There's so many good arms on that team. Gibbler is a guy to be watching. I think you're going to see a lot of him moving forward, a lefty, especially with Parker Coyle dinged up a little bit. I think that with Gackle, though, let him get his confidence back, whether it's middle relief, having him come in and close maybe on a weekend where Wiggins doesn't close. It remains to be seen, but I don't think they want to, throw the baby out with the bathwater on Gackle. He's still throwing 98 miles an hour. So little command. Really, Gackle, I thought, looked vintage Gackle against Vandy. He really had command of that fastball at the knees. He had it to where it was almost rising into the strike zone. And against Vandy, he was as good as he's looked all year. If he can find that moving forward, the Razorbacks are going to be really in great shape.
You're spoiled with riches when we can just say all these different names of these different guys and not even say a guy like Colin Fisher, who's looked really good at times, not even to mention, again, Dylan Carter, Ben Bybee, Will McIntyre, who's here for his 6th, 7th, 8th year, whatever it is, where all these guys can give you all this experience and you can be like, well, they're still the best staff in the country, even without Gabe Gackle, preseason All-American, not pitching to what we thought he would be pitching to this year.
And I don't think Razorback fans knew what they were getting in Zach Root. I don't think they really appreciated what they're getting in Beidelshees, who have been really, Zach Root has been the man the last month on that staff. Great point about Colin Fisher. I thought he looked really good. I know that they're playing UAPB, but I thought he spotted his fastball, really well. Ben Bybee has been honestly really refreshing to see. Everyone knows Ben on Tuesday, Wednesday is usually the starter midweek, but I thought he's come in out of the bullpen and really done a good job keeping the bats quiet also. It's an embarrassment of riches as far as how many pitchers the Razorbacks have. To your point, with Matt Hobbs being the assistant coach of the year last year and really cultivating such depth in that bullpen, righty, lefty. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Parker Coyle is a guy that we really, as far as Razorback Nation looking at that team, Parker Coyle is the X factor. If he can come back healthy, maybe the most reliable arm out of that pen, and a lefty, you mix him with Gibbler, also with Root and Beidelshees. Those are 4 great left-handed arms coming out of the bullpen. The schedule is another thing that I think Razorback fans need to be very aware of, the fact that Arkansas has had the ability to play probably the 2 worst teams in the SEC in South Carolina and Missouri. Missouri might be the worst SEC team I've ever seen. They may go. Are they 0 for the year right now, Evan?
I thought they won a weekend game, an SEC game a couple weeks ago. We might have to quickly.
I don't think they did. They've been donut so far. I may be wrong. I apologize to the KNW viewers, but that's it. I think Arkansas outscored them 17-3 on average every single game. I've seen midweek games that were more competitive than every game in the Missouri series. But point is, their schedule coming up is brutal. Obviously, Texas A&M, people are going to look at their schedule and they're going to go, well, they're 6-9. Well, they're 5-0 the last 5 games, including a series win over Tennessee, taking care of business with South Carolina. They were preseason number 1 based on the fact that they went to Omaha and they were just an inning away from winning the national title. So that's a loaded team.
Yeah.
And then Florida, who was in the top 10 this year, also is who they're going to next week. And then after that, it's Texas, it's LSU, it's Tennessee. It's going to be a very telling next few weeks for the Razorbacks, especially with the gauntlet that they're going to be going up against.
I'm a little mad you're jumping ahead. That was what we're hitting up next. But to your point about Missouri, you're right. 0-15 in conference, which again, LSU kind of all the same. Like Ole Miss, they scored average of 7-8 runs in that series. Texas gave up 7-15, and then the Arkansas series, which, you know, the Hogs just put up absolutely unfair video game numbers. And then again, even against Florida, 11-2, game 1 loss, 5-0, 7-inning, game 2 loss. Game 3, another 7-inning. That was a doubleheader, 3-2. So some close games for Missouri. So Garrett Jackson's team might be there, but as of right now, 0-15 doesn't look too good. But let's talk about this Texas A&M series because that's what's coming up. I know we've dived in a lot on pitching, so I want to talk about the Arkansas offense against this A&M pitching staff. What really stands out to you about this matchup? Because Ryan Prager, again, one of those guys who you could have made the argument should have been the baseball pitcher, preseason pitcher of the year, but it was Gabe Gackle instead. But Ryan Prager headlines this A&M staff that, and again, A&M as a team, like you've already mentioned, starting to come on. They've won 5-7 of their last straight games, and they're really turning the corner. And at the right time, there was questions early on, can Michael Early be that replacement for Jim Schlossnagle? They had all the talent in the world. Then Gavin Grahovic goes down. Caden Sorrell goes down. They've gotten Sorrell back. Where is this A&M team to you, and how do these two teams stack up this weekend?
Well, Prager is a guy who's had success against the Razorbacks. If I'm not mistaken, he went 7 shutout against Arkansas last year. And they looked like the team to me. I honestly believed that they were going to win the whole thing. Prager, to your point, I think that's a great argument. He could have easily been SEC Pitcher of the Year. Lefty. He throws hard. He throws low to mid-90s. He doesn't throw the kind of gas that Gackle does, but he can just pitch. He is a gutty competitor, great mound presence also. A&M's got dudes. They can come into Baum-Walker Stadium. They can win games. They can win any game they play against Arkansas. I think what Arkansas needs to do is get back to what they do well. All year long, they have gotten guys on base. They've had great, timely, 2-out runners in scoring position offense. And I think the number 1 guy who's been their one guy all year is Charles Davalon. I think that Charles Davalon should be in the National Player of the Year running. I think he's in the top 3 in the SEC in pretty much every offensive category there is. I don't know that Razorback fans had him on their radar this year, but he just seems to never strike out. He always puts the ball in play. He is disruptive on the base paths. I'll tell you who he reminds me of, being that I am way older than you, Evan, is Pete Rose as a hitter. He is just gutty. He never gets cheated, constantly making contact, and just a really, really hard-nosed ball player. And he has done a great job. I think if he can set the table for the Razorback offense, get Vahiva to where he can get guys on base, and then you're dealing with Logan Maxwell and obviously Cujillo, Brent. We need to get Brent Iredale also going. He has struggled the last couple of weeks. He doesn't seem like he's been seeing the ball very well, especially in the Georgia series. So we can get him going also. And Nolan Souza, that injury in Georgia. And I know we're probably not going to see Nolan for a while. And so it's Gabe Frazier. You also have to get Bowles. I thought Carson Bowles, who's hitting around 380. Got to find a way to get him involved. Kuhio Aloy being put in right field, by the way, Tuesday. I wasn't prepared for that. I showed up to the stadium getting ready for the game, and I looked at Jimmy Sanchez. I go, I'm sorry, he's not going to DH this game? And they're like, no, they're going to try him in right. You know, with UAPB, you can kind of fiddle around a little bit with the lineup, and it'll be interesting to see what they do this weekend from a lineup standpoint. I think you're probably going to see Frazier at second base, and they've dropped Iredale a little bit in the order. I think they dropped him to 6th. Brent Iredale seeing the ball really well would be a huge bonus for the Hawks.
Yeah, that's the step that Iredale needs to get back to what he was doing early in the season. But again, like, he's a guy that's transitioning from JUCO to the SEC. You know there's going to be ebbs and flows. And the good news is, if you're going to struggle, I think now is the time for some of these hitters to struggle, because you're kind of in that weird middle of the season, back half of the middle of the season where, playoffs are right around the corner. It's getting to May in about another 2 or so weeks. So now is kind of that time. If you don't have it, to start finding it yet again, so you can get hot at the right time, because that's what we haven't seen from Arkansas the last 2 years, where they haven't been hot. They haven't been firing on all cylinders when it comes to the postseason. But I want to go back to Charles Davalon really quickly. To your point, number one in the SEC when it comes to runs scored, number one in the SEC when it comes to hits. He's also in, doubles, triples, home runs. He's up there. He's got, I think, 11 or 12, but not as many as Vahiva Aloy does. But to your point, Davalon at bats, number 3 in the SEC. He's also getting on base a lot. I love that when I spoke to Kendall Diggs back in December, he said Davalon's a guy like Tavian Josenberger. When he goes, we go. And that's kind of what we've seen from this Arkansas offense at times, is when Davalon's hitting, the rest of the team's hitting. And that's what you want in a leadoff guy. And again, it's fun to see, too, second base, Cam Kojal sliding over to first and him having success there. I don't think many Razorback fans had that on their bingo card for this season as well.
No, I don't think people realize what a get Cam Kojal was. I mean, and he's such a versatile player defensively. Can play second, can play first, can play outfield. Well, how fun was that for him to go back to Vandy and just look like Mike Trout? You couldn't get him out. And to your point on Davalon, I think what people don't look at are strikeout numbers. I think we are just sort of numb as baseball fans in the 21st century to strikeout numbers. Whereas before, a great hitter was kind of judged on his, like you said, on base percentage. I don't know that Davalon has struck out a dozen times this year. Yeah. I feel like before last weekend, he had only struck out 9 times while you had Vahiva Aloy. And granted, with the Aloy brothers and Iredale and even Ryder Helfrich and those guys, power hitters, they do strike out a little more often. That just kind of comes with the territory. Davalon has such a high slugging percentage and on-base percentage. He's kind of a unicorn in that leadoff role to have that kind of power and contact rate. And that is what makes his season so special. And I think he is just the table setter. If he continues to hit the way he is, that team is dangerous, because then you're forced to pitch to guys like Vahiva Aloy, Kohiva Aloy, and those guys. And I think that this offense, that the people who want to bang on the coaching of the offense are not getting a lot of content this year, because that offense has outperformed what I think a lot of people thought they would.
Absolutely. John, before we go, any other preview that you want to talk that we didn't miss about this A&M series coming up?
Well, I do want to say I think it's really cool. It's a Thursday to Saturday game. We haven't talked about the weather. Dan Scoff, shout out, talking about how much precipitation there may be on Saturday. We may have the possibility of some time scheduling issues. Not really sure on that yet, but it's going to be interesting to see how they have to do that. We had to get really creative with the Missouri series. And, weather in Northwest Arkansas, you never tell. So that'll be something to keep an eye on, too.
Yeah, it should be really fun. John, thanks again for joining the show. That's going to do it for this segment of The Rubber Match. We'll be back right after this. Thanks to John for joining the show, and I hope everybody at home had a great time with this episode. I sure know that I did. And look, there's a great weekend of Arkansas athletics coming up right here on the Hill. You won't want to miss it. You can literally go from softball to football to baseball in one day on Saturday. That's something, if I was a fan, I wouldn't be missing. I know there are fans out there who will. So comment below. Let us know in the link below if you're going to make it out to every single game this weekend. And let me know what you think of the entire show. If you have any questions, any comments, any concerns, drop those in the comments. Not to mention as well, if you want something to see us do, if you want us to bring on special guests, please let us know. Again, this is a show for you guys at home. I want to make this as personal to everybody watching as possible. Again, Arkansas baseball is going to host Texas A&M. And let's talk softball a little bit, because they are one of the hotter teams in the country right now. And I have a gripe to pick really quickly. The fact that Arkansas has now gone on the road, they beat Tennessee in a series, Florida in a series, South Carolina in a series, and they can't crack the top 10 is a bit of a disgrace. We had questions early in the year that softball maybe couldn't win the big game after they, got swept by Oklahoma, lost out in California to UCLA by a pretty big margin. There were questions about Courtney Stifel's team. but they have stepped up. Ellen McDowell has been really fun to watch her take off this season, and Brie Ellis hitting 22 home runs in her season so far, the most in her career. Just a really incredible feat. Hopefully we'll have some more softball-centric stuff coming up as that season looks to come to a close in the postseason for softball right around the corner. But that is going to do it for this episode of The Rubber Match. Like I always say, thank you all so much for joining us. It's been a blast. I hope you at home enjoyed it, learned something of it, or just had some fun hanging out with me for the last 20 or 30 minutes. That is going to do it for this episode. We'll see you back here next week on The Rubber Match.